Reading from the Bible after I returned from some vacation over the weekend. So today we're looking at Judges 19. Last week we looked at Judges 17 and 18 and some other, and just looked at how we saw the people of Israel continuing to go further and further away from God. And they were, with the story of Micah and his idols, and him hiring a Levite to be his priest. And then the tribe of Dan coming along and stealing the Levite and the idols, and just doing what was right in their own eyes. And so things are getting worse and worse. And now we see a continuation of that as they continue to really just become more and more downgraded. And the people of Israel, we're looking at the last couple of chapters, and the people of Israel just kind of spiral further and further out of control. And that's what we see here. So looking at Judges 19, it begins with verse 1. In those days when there was no king in Israel, a certain Levite was sojourning in the remote parts of the hill country of Ephraim, who took to himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. And his concubine was unfaithful to him, and she went away from him to her father's house at Bethlehem in Judah. And was there some 4 months. Then her husband arose and went after her to speak kindly to her and bring her back. He had with him his servant and a couple of donkeys, and she brought him into her father's house. And the girl's father saw him. When the girl's father saw him, he came with joy to meet him. And his father-in-law, the girl's father, made him stay, and he remained there 3 days. So they ate and drank and spent the night there. And on the 4th day, they arose early in the morning, and he prepared to go. But the girl's father said to his son-in-law, "Strengthen your heart with a morsel of bread, and after that you may go." So the two of them sat and ate and drank together. The father's girl said to the man, "Be pleased to spend the night, and let your heart be merry." And the man rose up to go. His father-in-law pressed him till he spent the night there again. And on the 5th day, he arose early in the morning to depart. And the father's girl said, "Strengthen your heart and wait until the day declines." So they ate, both of them. And when the man and his concubine and his servant rose up to depart, his father-in-law, the girl's father, said to him, "Behold, now the day is waning toward evening. Please spend the night. Behold, the day draws to its close. Lodge here and let your heart be merry. And tomorrow you shall arise early in the morning for your journey and go home." But the man would not spend the night. He rose up and departed and arrived opposite Jebus, that is Jerusalem. He had with him a couple of saddled donkeys, and his concubine was with him. And when they were near Jebus, the day was nearly over, and his servant said to his master, "Come, let us turn aside to this city of the Jebusites and spend the night in it." And his master said to him, "We will not turn aside into a city of foreigners who do not belong to the people of Israel, but we will pass on to Gibeah." And when he said to his young man, "Come, let us draw near to one of these places and spend the night at Gibeah or at Ramah," so they passed on and went their way. And the sun went down on them near Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. And they turned aside there to go in and spend the night at Gibeah. And he went in and sat down in the open square of the city, for no one took them into his house to spend the night. And behold, an old man who was coming from his work in the field at evening, the man was from the hill country of Ephraim and was sojourning at Gibeah. The men of the place were Benjaminites. And he lifted up his eyes and saw the traveler in the open square of the city. And the old man said, "Where are you going? And where do you come from?" And he said to him, We are passing from Bethlehem in Judah to the remote parts of the hill country of Ephraim, from which I come. I went to Bethlehem in Judah, and I am going to the house of the Lord, but no one has taken me in to his house. We have straw and feed for our own donkeys, with bread and wine for me, and your female servant, and the young man with your servants. There is no lack of anything. And the old man said, Peace be to you. I will care for you for all your wants. Only do not spend the night in the square. So he brought him into his house, gave his donkeys feed, and they washed their feet and ate and drank. As they were making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, worthless fellows, surrounded the house, beating on the door. And they said to the old man, the master of the house, Bring out the man who came into your house, that we may know him. And the man, the master of the house, went out to them and said to them, No, my brothers, do not act so wickedly, since this man has come into my house. Do not do this vile thing. Behold, here are my virgin's daughters and his concubines. Let me bring them out, violate them, and do what you seems good to you against them. But against the man, do not do this outrageous thing. But the men would not listen. So the man seized his concubine and made her go out to them. And they knew her and abused her until all night until morning. And as the dawn began to break, they let her go. And as morning appeared, the woman came and fell at the door of the house of the man, of the door of the man's house where her master was, until it was light. And her master rose up in the morning, and when he opened the doors of the house and went out to go on his way, behold, there was his concubine laying at the door of the house, with her hands on the threshold. And he said to her, Get up, let us be going. But there was no answer. Then he put her on the donkey, and the man rose up and went away to his home. And when he entered his house, he took a knife, and taking hold of his concubine, he divided her limb by limb into 12 pieces, and sent her throughout all the territories of Israel. And all who saw it said, Such a thing has never happened or been seen from the day that the people of Israel came up out of the land of Egypt until this day. Consider it, take counsel and speak. So this begins by reminding us, in those days there was no king in Israel. And it ends with this man's concubine, which really means his second wife in this context, being cut up after she had died and being sent to the tribes of Israel. This is an awful thing. And this, again, is coming to the culmination of this is what it was like without no king. The people of Israel did their own thing. They did what was right in their own eyes, and they answered to no one, all of the tribes. And so you have this Levite who has a second wife who is unfaithful. And really what it meant is she ran back to her father's house. And so he goes and gets her. And stays with the father-in-law. And for some reason, the father-in-law doesn't seem to want him to leave. We don't understand exactly all of that. But eventually, he does leave, but he doesn't leave until the day's already waning on is it the fourth or the fifth day? And yeah, the fifth day. And as they are going, his servant looks out and sees what will be known as Jerusalem, which is still under the control of the Gibeonites or the Jebusites. And he says, well, let's stay here. But his master, the Levite, says, no, we don't want to stay with foreigners. We only want to stay in cities of the people of Israel, of our kinsmen in some way, shape, or form. Maybe not from our tribe, but the people of Israel are still all connected. They understand themselves to be one people, even though they still make up 12 and really more tribes with the Levites. They're their own tribe that are dedicated to God. And so they go to Gibeah, and they sit down in the city square. No one brings them in. This is a huge thing now. In ancient culture, ancient Middle Eastern culture, the accepting of guests and taking care of guests, that was hospitality was something that was mandatory, really, almost mandatory. And for them to have gone to a city, especially a city part of the nation of Israel or the tribes of Israel, and not found hospitality, someone to let them stay with them, is a red flag automatically. And so eventually, a man from Ephraim, from where this Levite is going, comes and brings them in. He takes care of them. But then the men of the city come and surround the house. And it says that they are men of the city, worthless fellows. They surround the house and they say, "Bring out the man who came into your house that we may know him." Now, this is a really familiar phrase and situation because this is very similar to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. And so one of the things here is they are doing some of these same things that the people of Sodom did when the two angels stayed with Lot. And so the Levite eventually, like the man says, "Don't do this awful thing," offers his own daughters, which is problematic, first of all, and the secondary wife, this concubine of the Levite, which is problematic as well. And the men said, "No, no, no, no. We want to know this man." And he this man from Ephraim, the sojourner, goes back in, and the Levite essentially shoves his concubine, his secondary wife, the one that he went and he talked so sweetly to win her back, just shoves her out the door and closes the door and doesn't seem to have any concern. All goes back to, and this was a time when there was no king, and men did what was right in their own, each in his own eyes. He's just saving his skin, and he isn't concerned truly about her, so much that these worthless men, they violate her all night. And in the morning, the man gets up and gets ready to go and comes out and isn't really concerned because he's not looking for his wife, but he sees her at the threshold holding on to it. And he tells her to get up, it's time to go. And she doesn't respond. He then takes her and puts her on a donkey, and they go their way. Now, we aren't told if she died at this point or if she died later on, but then he goes, and she's apparently dead at this point, and he cuts up her body to send out to the rest of the tribes. And this is awful. First of all this that happened before this, but this symbol, what's going on here? Well, he's sending a message to the tribes of Israel, just as gory and awful and really shocking and the audacity of what happened in this situation is mirrored in what he's sending to the 12 tribes, and says, this is what was happened. This happened, and tells the story. They tell the story when they deliver these limbs of what happened at Gibeah, what happened, and what the people of the tribe of Benjamin did. They send them out. This is what it looks like when things devolve. This is what it looks like when people are only concerned about themselves and don't look at what God wants, and instead do their own thing. That's the story of the book of Judges. And this is the culmination of what happens when the people of Israel do what's each do what right is right in their own eyes. May we be a people who learn from this, who learn that it is not acceptable to do what's right in our own eyes, but we should seek what God wants for us. Seek the good of the common good, the good of the community, and ask God, how should we now live? People of Israel at this point did not do that. May we be a people who learn from their lessons. Hope you guys are doing well. Have a wonderful day.